Okay, Fury Warrior in TBC. I keep hearing on the internet, online in videos, that Fury Warrior is suddenly just going to be a garbage spec. This couldn't be further from the truth. In 2008, a Fury Warrior was a big dick DPS class. Pretty much every guild back then, prior to Sunwell, was running a Fury Warrior. Some guilds were running multiple Fury Warriors. We're talking about a spec that's probably the best cleave spec in the game, with incredible burst using Recklessness, is the strongest single target melee spec for a significant chunk of the content, and Fury also has by far the best AoE of any of the melee specs, and pretty much in general other than Warlocks and Mages. So there's Rogues. They've got the undeniable advantage of being able to drop threat, but Fury Warriors are still pretty competitive with Rogues on single target for the entire expansion. And Fury Warriors bring Battle Shout and Demoralizing Shout, improved Demoralizing Shout to be more specific. So one of the important curses that a Warlock is going to use is Curse of Recklessness. This reduces the boss's armor, but it also increases the boss's attack power. So you'd use improved Demoralizing Shout to reduce the attack power back down to the minimum. Both Arms and Fury Warriors can bring the improved Demo Shout, but it's a little bit easier for the Fury Warrior because Arms are quite global cooldown locked. So we all know the meta in Sunwell was to bring an Arms Warrior rather than a Fury Warrior. Arms Warrior brought Blood Frenzy, which was 4% physical damage debuff, and that would boost the Hunters, the Rogues, and the tank threat. But the offset was the Arms Warrior did a lot less DPS than a Fury Warrior. So you'd have to have enough physical damage in the raid to make up for the loss, and typically that did work out, but it was still a close margin. If you had a Fury Warrior with dual Warglyphs, you'd probably just take Fury Warrior. I mean, it's not like a big deal. Just looking back at classic vanilla for a second, where warriors are unbelievably overpowered, obviously it looks like a downgrade compared to vanilla. But in TBC, Fury is still the best cleave spec in the game. It's maybe the third best AoE spec, and it's one of the strongest single target specs, with an unbelievably strong execute phase if you combine Recklessness with your cooldowns and a haste pot. Anyway, I'm going to play a couple of clips and then I'll give some commentary and explanation. So first we're going to take a look at Theradon, last boss of tier 4, amazing Fury Warrior fight. Start the fight, cleaving down the ads, interrupt the shadow bolts, try not to pull aggro but probably will, and just burst in and down. Amazing part of the fight for Fury Warriors because we've got passive AoE and passive cleave while we single target priority DPS the main target, so ideal really. Just skipping ahead to the last channelers coming down, still see 3 Fury Warriors top of the DPS. That doesn't mean this is always going to be the case, but the point I'm making is the Fury is really good for the first phase. So I've skipped ahead now to later in the fight. Now what warriors will typically do on this fight to do more DPS is wait for the boss to spawn a fire pool underneath him, which is quite common, even though it's not you at the moment, and stand in the fire to take a debuff to gain more rage. This is tier 4, being rage starved is quite common, so sometimes you do have to know when to hold rage, when to pool it to make the most of your DPS. This is quite an important part of doing good DPS on Fury Warrior in the early tiers, is using your rage wisely when you're in periods of low rage. But as you can see, Warrior and melee in general is performing well in this fight. The Red Paladin, this is 2.4.3 and this is a Horde guild, so Red Paladin in 2.4.3 is pretty good. So we've skipped ahead now to the execute phase. I think I'm about to take a fire debuff. So long as your healers know this is taking place, you should be fine. And that's kind of the great thing about Theradon and Grull as a Fury Warrior. Even if you're not intentionally taking extra damage, there's a lot of raid damage going around and it feeds you the rage that you need. So now we're going to take a look at Grull. It's a single target fight. There's a lot of raid damage that takes place here, but it's also really threat sensitive on the tanks. So the 2 tanks need to be first and second on threat. So if you watch, we're actually holding our cooldowns. And when the guy uses his drums, that's when we're going to pop all our cooldowns and start DPS in. So that's going to happen at some point soon. There we go. And cooldowns popped and off we go. So I'm 3rd on DPS right now. The Hunter went ballistic at the start, but Hunters can reset aggro. But let's just take a look and what takes place later on. So I've skipped ahead to midway through the fight. As you can see, I've caught up on DPS. We lost a rogue and a warlock. This hunter is going to win on the DPS, but I'm there fighting. Fury Warrior is really strong on this fight. Really great. Skip ahead again. So I've skipped ahead again. My dreams are about to be shattered because I'm going to die. Effectively, the second tank goes out of range and I get smacked. So I'm going to get battle rest, but my dream is over. Let's wait for the battle res. Come on. Come on, battle res me. We all know the feeling. Come on. Where's the battle res? Dreams? There we go. Battle res. I'm back alive. Okay, let's skip ahead. Moss is on 6%. We're finishing it off. Looking a bit rough. But I'm second on damage. Had I survived, maybe I would have beaten the hunter. But the point is, Fury Warrior is pretty good on this fight. Even though I had to hold my DPS at the pull to avoid pulling aggro. And look, Dragonspine Trophy, the dream. Unfortunately, it was not for me. The Enhancement Shaman was the Guildmaster, so the Enhancement Shaman took the Dragonspine Trophy. No hard feelings. So we're going to take a look at the Aoe Fight in Karathrass. This is Ilhoof. This fight is the best for Warlocks. They will beat Fury Warriors on this fight every single time if you've got a good Warlock. But in this particular group we did not have a Warlock, so this is just passive cleave, passive AoE. I'm DPSing the boss. The only thing I'm changing is that I'm using cleave instead of heroic strike. And while I'm doing pretty good priority single target DPS, I'm also AoE cleaving passively, and because I'm getting killing blows on all these little imps, I'm also getting Victory Rush, which hits just as hard as Bloodthirst for free. So Warrior is insane on this fight. The only reason it's not the best class is because Warlock is even more insane. But as you can see, Fury Warrior is amazing on this particular fight in Karathrass, and it's so fun. So much fun. Okay, we're moving onwards to Fathom Lord Karathrass. Now unfortunately I don't have the full fight to show you the start and the strategy that we used, but effectively we used strategy where we'd cleave tank almost all of the fight right at the start and burst it down with Recklessness and Bloodlust. And the resulting DPS is absolutely amazing. 2.7k, I think I finished on about 2.6. Arms Warriors can do it as well because they've got Sweeping Strikes, they've got Whirlwind, they've got Recklessness, and they've got Death Wish as well. So Arms is also amazing at this strategy. And Rogues are pretty good as well with Blade Flurry. In terms of gear, this is a tier 4 Fury Warrior. Rage Steel Shoulders, tier 4 chest. Yes, I've got Dragon Strike and Talon of the Shara, which makes a big difference. They are tier 5 weapons. But the point I'm trying to make is this is not a full best in slot tier 5 or tier 6 warrior going back and doing lots of DPS. This is current content. If you were a tier 6 DPS warrior doing this fight using this strategy, well executed, good raid DPS, good cooldown stack, you'd probably do double or more this kind of DPS in this scenario. Okay, moving on again. This is Monogrip Tidewalker. This fight heavily favours mages and warlocks. They just kick ass on this fight. But again, warrior is doing single target DPS while passive cleaving. So you're doing a lot of damage to the boss while you're also gaining a massive amount of DPS from the ads. So warrior is kicking ass on this fight. I'd say it's probably the third, Fury Warrior is probably the third best spec on this fight. And lastly, for a bit of fun, Karathrass. He spawns ads throughout the entire fight, so lots of cleave. And he feeds you with rage constantly from damage taken. And the best part is the evocation, where if you've got your cooldowns up, he takes a massive amount of extra damage, and warrior DPS absolutely bursts through the roof. Now we've got some overgeared players in the raid, from the simp guys in the tier 5 raid, so like tier 4, a couple of tier 5 bits. And the DPS just absolutely explodes. I'm about to pull aggro when I go straight on the boss and die. But absolute insanity. And it's so fun. Fury Warrior is the most fun spec in TBC. And it's good on single target, it's good on cleave, it's good on AoE. While it's obviously not as strong as it was in vanilla, you could still argue that it's overpowered from a cleave perspective. Fury Warrior is a really strong and fun spec to play in Burning Crusade. Don't reroll Hunter and Warlock if you like playing Fury Warrior, because it's still the most fun spec in the game. And it's still good enough to be taken to all the raids. You might not be top DPS on every fight. You probably won't be. But it's got to be better than sitting there all night pressing Shadow Bolt. Just think about it. Keep playing your Fury Warrior, TBC.